Hello, my name is MegaNova, and once again, a very different kind of video than what I mostly do. Then again, I guess I don't really have a certain kind of video I mostly do. I kind of just do whatever. But, this is going to be a very personal video, to say the least. So, I just watched the first two parts of Illymation's little video series she's making on an abusive relationship she was in. There's only two parts out so far. She's gonna put part 3 out in, I guess, 4 days, since this was released 3 days ago, and she said it would be a week, but that's besides the point. I watched that, and I realized I could relate to a lot of these points. Because I too have been in an abusive relationship quite a while ago. So, while I guess you could say my relationship wasn't as bad as hers, as you'll see if you've watched her videos and then hear my story. I don't think we should really judge this in terms of who had it worse. We should rather just have it be examples of stuff you shouldn't accept from your partner. And just be able to, read the situation, and you should be able to realize that you have to get out of there. Because that's a very big problem with this. That often you simply don't realize that it's bad for you what is going on. And that can be for a myriad of different reasons. So, well, I guess we should have a bit of backstory. Which would probably give some context already. So, before I was with her, I already had a girlfriend. We were together for about 8 months, which, funnily enough, is also the amount of time I've spent with the abusive one. And she was actually a really sweet girl. My problem at the time was she was very clingy. And that was nice to begin with, but I kind of got tired of it over time. It was just a bit too much. And I'm not even necessarily blaming her. It was just what I thought of it. And to this day, I actually kind of regret leaving her, especially because I did it in a very dickish way. And yeah, I wasn't exactly the best person at the time myself either. I will freely admit that. But yeah, so, I guess what the first point where you could say it wasn't necessarily as bad is, well, I was 18, and so was my abusive ex, so there weren't any pedophilia thing going on here. So, that at least is better, but yeah, so, while I was with my ex before her, I'd gotten to know her, of course. I think I got to know her while I was with her, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And, one of the big red flags I should have seen to begin with was the fact that she was, really heavily trying to make me cheat on my current girlfriend at the time. She was all about, oh, we should meet and do things, and I'll send you pictures and all kind of bullshit. And already at that time, I should have just called it quits and just stay away from me and my girlfriend. Just no. But being weak-willed as I was at the time, I just kinda accepted it, and again, that is where my assholishness kind of came in because, well, I guess I technically kind of cheated on my girlfriend at the time by accepting those pictures from this other girl. Again, I'm not claiming to necessarily have the moral high ground in all of this story, but you'll see when we get further into it. So, sorry, I just gotta collect my thoughts. Just gotta remember what actually happened. So, I lived at like this kind of institution thing, foster home kind of thing. I'm not sure what exactly to call it. We don't really have a proper direct translation of what it's called. But I think foster home is like the closest thing to it. Is like because of my various mental illnesses like ADHD, Asperger's, and such. I wasn't really fit to attend a regular school, and there was also difficulties in terms of bringing me up with my regular parents. Like, I needed special attention, special needs and shit like that. Yes, I am an actual autist. Just make all the jokes you want. So I had lived there since I was 12, but that's a completely different story. I can probably cover that in another video, or several other videos probably, since it's 6 years of kind of hell. Although the school was good, but that's, again, besides the point. And while I was attending 10th grade down there, I met this girl, and we were together for a while. That was nice, but I then, because I was 17 when I was with the other girl, and I had to move out, because that foster home, they don't want people there who are over 18 unless they have like really severe problems. My problems weren't bad enough that was needed. So as soon as I turned 18, it's just like, well, you can't live here anymore. So I had to go move to my own place. So I moved back to the city where I grew up, where my parents are still living. Or, well, my dad is. My mom lives someplace else because of work related to something with my aunt and uncle, but that's something completely different. So she lives on an other island. Take like 3 hours to get there or something. But so I moved back to the city I originally grew up in, and because that's like what is it even? I think it's like 1.5 hour with the train. It's like, it was a fairly long distance. It was a somewhat long distance relationship. I know if you're in the US, it's like, oh, 1.5 hour, that's nothing. It's quite a bit for a tiny country like Denmark. So I decided to break it off with her, in conjunction with the fact that that other girl had been flirting so much with me. So I was like, well, I'm gonna break it off with my current girlfriend, and I'm gonna start dating her instead. Again, I was an asshole. Not gonna deny that. Though I never physically cheated on her. I guess I got that going for me. But that, again, I can go over that some other time. What happened was then, I then told her that I had broken up with my now ex-girlfriend at the time. And she was super happy because, wait, now she could be with me. Yeah, sure, okay. And so we started dating. And we hadn't even been together for a week. And my mom and her husband at the time, they were living in Sweden. But they had to go travel for 11 days. So I was like, and they wanted me to go and take care of their animals. They had a cat and a dog over there. Of course, they needed feeding, and the dog needed to go walks and such. So I went there, but before that, I was like, hey, I just got a new girlfriend. We could go there together. It could be lots of fun. So we did go there together, and for some of the time, it was fun, but just remember the detail, we had barely even been together for 1 week. One of the first days we were over there, we just watched a movie. And she had, we were in the living room on the couch, and she had just left. She went out to the hallway. It was like a pretty big house. My mom and her husband at the time, they were renting it. But it was a pretty big house. It had a second story and lots of rooms and all that kind of stuff. But, so she went out into the hallway, and I don't remember why. She just went there to get something or whatever. And she then yells out from the hallway if I'd seen her phone. Not like in an aggressive manner or anything, just, raising her voice so I could hear her from out there. So it was fine. And I see the phone is on the couch. I just assume, well, it probably just got out of her pocket while she was sitting there. So I pick up the phone just to, show her that, yeah, it's right here. And her response is that she gets this, murderous, demonic glare in her eyes and just charges at me like this and takes me in a chokehold for daring to touch her fucking phone. But the even bigger point of hypocrisy here is every day she had to look through my messages on my phone to make sure I wasn't cheating on her. Again, I've already said I'm not necessarily a saint here, but I hadn't texted anything inappropriate with anyone at this point. I did later on in the relationship. I kind of tried to keep it hidden. Again, there's probably going to be people who want to call me out on hypocrisy or whatever, but I just want to get all the facts out there. I don't want to have you think that I think I am the moral high ground or whatever. And I'm not trying to excuse doing those things. I'm just saying, even at least at this point, I hadn't done anything like that to her. But every day she had to check through my messages to see maybe if I cheated on her. Which leads me to believe that she possibly cheated on me. Because, there's the mentality that if you do something, you will automatically think that other people are doing that thing as well. I don't know if it's a saying anywhere else, but in Denmark we have the saying, a thief thinks all men steal. And that's basically just describing that mentality. So based off of that and based off of how secretive she was, we were together for 8 months. I didn't meet any of her family. I think I met one of her friends through 8 months. And she frequently attended family gatherings with my family. And she often met my friends. And there could be a reason. I'm not gonna deny maybe there was I think she told me at one point she didn't want me to meet her mom because she was an alcoholic or something like that. But it just still seems weird overall. But yeah, basically, here started all of the, of her, psychological abuse towards me. Where, she would, everything was always my fault in one way or the other. Whatever happened, and so, also, we had as I said, we had only been together for like less than a week. And we got into a few verbal fights that would somehow end up with her standing in front of me with either a knife or a piece of broken glass, threatening to cut herself. The worst thing is, I don't even remember how any of these fights started. I just remember they happened very frequently. And I still remember, and again, there's probably going to be people who are going to start blaming me for shit because of this, but a lot of the time, it ended up with me slapping her. And I know, now everybody's going to say, oh, but so you were actually physically abusive. I only did that because I panicked. Basically, I was like, well, I don't know what to do. And I had seen in movies where people, like, slap someone and then they, snap out of it. So I was like, maybe it works in real life, so maybe I should try that. And I mean, it sort of worked. Like, she kind of snapped out of it. Then I break down because I felt bad about having hit her, because I don't like doing that. I'm not a violent person, at least not anymore. Like, I used to be when I was a kid. I was, like, super aggressive because people would bully me and shit like that. So I would, react harshly. I apparently I've blocked this out of my memory, but I was even told later on that as a little kid, I would, like, throw around chairs and tables, and though I do remember this one. I once bit a teacher because we didn't agree on something. So I was a very violent child, but since the age of, like, I think around 13, 14, I started to mellow out a lot and became, like, much more pacifistic. And I'm not really into violence, unless it's, like, something extreme, like a child rapist or something. They can get... I wouldn't mind if they got tortured or whatever. As long as, there is actual provable evidence that they did it, because I don't think that we want to have the shred of doubt that maybe it was, like, a false accusation or something, and an actual innocent person ended up getting mistreated in that way, so... It would only be in cases where, there was 100% provable evidence that they had done that. Like this wasn't child rape, but, still child abuse. I remember watching this TV show where they showed this nanny, and she had abused a child by taking them in the legs and swinging them very harshly. Which also indicated she was, like, a professional at doing it, because she knew that it wouldn't leave any bruises, but it would still, cause harm to the child. So, and what would then happen, I would break down crying over having hit her, because I felt bad about it. And I know people will probably be saying then, oh, you're just trying to get pity. You're actually just as bad. Like, no, I legit felt terrible about it. And what usually would then happen was that we would go have makeup sex. And honestly, that was pretty much the only thing that worked in that entire relationship. That was, like, we had pretty good sex. And that's it. Everything else was bad. But it's kind of like that, the Offspring song, Self-Esteem. Pretty much the same situation where I was like, I knew I had to get out of there. But whenever she was like, well, I'm ready to fuck, and I was like, well, okay, because, she was a blonde with large tits. And I was like, well, I probably can't do any better than this anyway, so I should just stay. But even then, I actually did try to break it off with her, I think at least like 3 or 4 times. throughout those 8 months. Like, I tried several times, but every time it would be either she would threaten suicide, or she would just, like, the first couple times I tried doing it in person. Like, I can't do this anymore, this is too much, we fight too much, it's just, no, I can't do this. And she would like to, and she would always try to rationalize and be like, oh, but this works, and all this. I also seem to remember that she would sometimes try to keep me down in, you know, the classic abuser way of making you feel like you couldn't do any better. Like, again, this happened like 9 years ago, so I can't necessarily remember everything down to the smallest detail. But I seem to recall that she also further manipulated me like that, well, I probably couldn't do better than her anyways. Also, she would constantly try to change me while claiming she liked me the way I was. Like, you know, my style of having piercings and very black clothing and such. I was a bit more extreme with it back then. Like, I had these, like, big pants with chains everywhere and massive boots with spikes and skulls and all that kind of stuff. I was a bit more extreme with it back then. And she claimed to be very much into that. But she still tried to change me into being more like, you know, a Justin Bieber type. You know, she would try to convince me to cut my hair. I never did. I did stand my ground on that. She was like, oh, I should cut my hair. I should start styling it with gel and all that kind of stuff. And she was like, oh, you need to buy these kinds of clothes, because that's the kind of clothes I like. Despite it not being the kind of clothes I wanted to, you know, own. What else was there? Oh yeah. Later on, when I realized that trying to break up with her in person didn't work, I tried breaking up with her over the phone. The problem there was, what she would then do is she would go from her place and go to my place in order to try and talk me out of it. And of course it worked, because I was an idiot. Hell, I was even... she even got me so fucking whipped. Besides me hating Twilight, having several... Like, she was a massive fan of Twilight. And she... we watched the first movie together that week over in Sweden. We watched the first movie, and already then I was... Like, this was before I had seen any of the backlash on the internet towards it. My own opinion was just like, why the fuck is he sparkling? What even is this? Why is this? So it wasn't even just that I jumped on the bandwagon. I just saw the movie and I was like, what the hell even? So, and she was like, oh, but I love this movie, we should watch more of it. And I was like, I fucking hate it, but okay, if you absolutely really have to, fine. So we watched the first one, and then on our, what should we say, halfway anniversary, like our 6 months of being together, I wanted to really, like, you know, make a big thing out of it. Because, you know, I wanted to be a good boyfriend and all. So I was like, okay, I'll go and I'll get her a bouquet of flowers. I'll buy her a teddy bear. Like a pretty big teddy bear, actually. And I had already, I had ordered tickets for for the second Twilight movie, New Moon, I think it was. Despite that we had talked about it earlier, and I had convinced her that I had bought tickets for another movie. You know, to kind of surprise her. And that day, oh my god, that fucking day. So, I had just gotten off of school, and I was standing there with a friend from school, a classmate, and he had been with me while I went to buy those things, and I was standing at this. We had agreed that she should meet me at the station at my school, because she lived pretty close to there anyways. So we were just like, oh, she'll come there and we'll go together into to Copenhagen. So where I had also made reservations at a restaurant. Yeah. But what happens is she comes in and like she basically ignores the fact that I'm like have these things for her. And I know I'm gonna sound like a whiny bitch now, but she basically ignored the fact that I was standing there with flowers and a plushie for her. All she wanted to talk about was that somebody on the train was being a bitch. And I was like, could you at least like acknowledge these things? And she was like, oh, you can just get my reaction later. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's not how reactions work. A reaction is something, that happens right away. You can't just fake a reaction later on. And I know that's also very relevant to YouTube. But, so, that was kind of a bad start to it all, so I got kind of meh about that. And then we got into like a little bit of an argument, like we weren't yelling at each other or anything, but it was just like a little bit. Then this homeless guy comes by and starts talking shit to her, and I go in between them to be like, hey, back off of my girlfriend, like this is a thing between us, you don't have to get involved. And then we kind of get into like a physical fight. Problem was, this was at winter, and I was wearing like, I wasn't wearing my big boots today, I was wearing like some smaller shoes. So when I tried to, or he punched out at me, I dodged, but when I dodged, I slipped on the ice, to where he then kicks me right in the face. So I'm like, just, my jaw just hurts for the rest of the day. Like, he kicked me in the face and then he just walks off. Luckily, he didn't do more than that, but he kicked me in the fucking face. And it hurt like hell. Like, I could just, some places I got kind of numb, other places my my face just fucking hurt. Which didn't make it easier because the place I had ordered at, gotten reservations for us was a fucking steakhouse. I wanted to get some fucking spare ribs. I guess, lucky for me, the spare ribs were very, tender. So, it wasn't like it was that difficult, but generally just moving my jaw hurt for the rest of the day. So, that was a pretty bad start, right? I guess I could say at least the rest of the day was not that bad, except, having to watch Twilight New Moon. At least I got popcorn there. And then after the movie, we went to the steakhouse and we ate and then went home, and that was our 6-month day. Again, I don't necessarily want to go into every small detail I'll just go into like certain stories. But yeah, and also she seemed to just be like a perpetual liar. She had like all these big stories about shit, but never seemed to like have any kind of evidence that those things actually happened or whatever. But I think that's enough of this. We can kind of go to the end now. So, around I think we probably a month before we broke up, a month or two, I started going to a place called the King's Garden. It's this like park we have in the middle of Copenhagen. There's some statues, and there are these like flower beds and stuff like that in there. And it's generally just a place people come to hang out. And I had recently ran into some people in another part of Copenhagen who usually go there, but they were hanging out in another place. I had met them and I befriended them. It's like the alternative crowd or whatever you're going to call them, like, you know, the goths, the emos, the punks, stuff like that. I started becoming friends with them. Started hanging out with them at that park, even though it was like in the middle of winter. Because as I said, like our 6-month day was at winter, and yeah, we were together for 8 months. So yeah, that mostly lines up. Yeah, that seems about right, actually. But so I started hanging out there and started, you know, getting new friends. I didn't really have many friends at the time, other than people I'd met online. Partly because of, like, I was very introverted. Partly because, you know, my autism and ADHD and stuff like that. Probably mostly my autism and my Tourette's. It made me very introverted. I was very aggressive, as I told. I'd been very aggressive as a kid. I'd grown out of it. And I started hanging out with them. And yeah, started making more friends. Actually, you know, real life friends and not just internet friends. And I just started, you know, getting the feeling that was basically what saved me. I started feeling, hey, I'm better than this. I deserve better than being treated the way she does. And I mean, I guess I kind of already realized that by the fact that I tried to break up with her several times already. But I was at this party at this dude's place, and I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I need to get out. I can't with this anymore. So I sent her a text that I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna break it off with you. And she started spamming me. Oh no, I'm gonna jump out from the third floor. I'm gonna commit suicide. All that kind of shit. And I was at the point, honestly, okay, if she had done it, I would probably have felt guilty, but at that moment, I was just at such a point of not caring that I probably wouldn't have cared if she had actually done it. At least in the moment, but, you know, later I would have realized it was fucked up, but still, I was just like, you know what, do whatever the fuck you want. And then, the next day, I get this text from her that's like, oh, it was wonderful having sex with my ex. And as I said, I was to the point of not caring. I just wrote to her, oh, well, then he got something. I bet he's happy about that. And again, I kind of have a suspicion she probably fucked around with him even before we actually broke up. But yeah, that is basically the overall story about how I got into and during and how I got out of an abusive relationship. And why did I make this video? Well, as I said, partly because of I watched that illymation video, but also just I wanted to, give a different spin on it than she did. Like, her spin on it was from a minor that was being pressured into things by someone who, clearly should know better, who was much older than her. But I guess I wanted to say with this that you can end up in a situation like this even if you're not a minor. Like, anyone at any age, any gender, any sex, any sexuality, anyone can end up in this kind of situation. And no matter who you are, that doesn't make it any less or more valid. Abusive relationships just shouldn't happen. And if you're in one, try and get some kind of help to get out of it if you can't find the means to get out of it yourself. I was lucky that I somehow found a way to escape. But not everyone gets that lucky. So I guess that's my main reason for having made this video. Whew, boy. That took it out of me. That's, I don't like to think back on these things, but I will say, one thing I did learn out of this entire experience. I learned to appreciate myself more. I learned to put myself, ahead, like, not necessarily to be selfish, but I learned to respect myself. I learned that I had to be able to respect myself. And sometimes you have to realize that you need to put yourself first. You need to put your own well-being first. And don't think of it as being selfish. Think of it as being self-preserving. You gotta protect yourself. And you can't necessarily expect people around you to protect you, because they don't necessarily know what is going on. Especially if you're not vocal about it, which I wasn't. I didn't want to be vocal about it because, well, I was afraid nobody would take me seriously. I legit thought that people would just brush me off and like, oh, but you're a man. How could you be abused by a woman? That's not how it works. You're so much bigger and stronger and shit like that. But that's not necessarily how it works. Especially when you don't want to be, like maybe if I had actually been, like, physically violent towards her, she wouldn't have been that bad towards me. Like, yes, I did slap her from time to time when we were in those major fights where she would threaten to cut herself. But I would never do it otherwise. It was only, because in my mind it was like, well, maybe this will snap her out of it. That was my logic, and maybe that was wrong. Probably was. That was my logic at the time. But otherwise, I did absolutely everything I could to make her feel as good as possible. But, and even worse, she would later on use the fact that I had slapped her in those situations against me, saying that, oh, but I couldn't say anything because I was physically abusive towards her. So, now she's also blaming me for shit. Take away from this what you will, but I just hope if anyone who watches this who is in any kind of abusive relationship, I hope you get out of it. I hope you manage somehow to get help. I will not call you stupid for staying in it, because I know how hard it can be to get out. Also, I was mentioning my mom's husband at the time. Yeah, he was abusive too. There were several times where I would stay awake at night, and I could hear them arguing, and I could hear very clearly that he was hitting her. So, yeah. There was also plenty of nights where I could very audibly hear them having sex. But, yeah, we'll just leave that be. I don't want to think of either of those. But, if you made it all the way through this, thank you for listening to me ramble on for I don't know how long. I think like 45 minutes or whatever. But thank you for listening to me bitching and moaning and whining about something that happened to me 9 years ago. If you want to see more of me, you can subscribe. There's also all my social medias down in the description. Also, I will link Illymation's first video in about her bad relationship. I'll link that down in the description. And yeah, I hope I'll see you next one. And have a good one.